Okay, everybody, thanks so much for joining me today for Kineo Totara Office Hours. Today what we're going to be talking about is creating and editing roles. I recently got back from an on-site client training. One of you is actually here with me today. Hi, Megan. And in that meeting, we talked a lot about kind of creating and editing roles. And I realized when we did that I haven't talked about that in office hours. And it's something that comes up pretty regularly. It comes up quite a lot in most of my client trainings that I do. And so it's kind of helpful to have something out there as a good resource to kind of refer back to refresh your memory from time to time. So that's what we're going to talk about today. A little bit about myself. My name is Taylor Craig, and I'm a platforms consultant here at Kineo. So I get to travel all over and meet with all of our lovely clients, and I also get to work really closely with all of our solution architects and make sure that you are comfortable and associated with your solution. So that's kind of a little bit about what I do. Platforms consultant is just a fancy term for trainer. A little bit about office hours. For those of you who don't know, if you haven't joined us or you're watching the recording, what we do is we do about a 15-20 minute random presentation over something Totara. If you guys have an idea, feel free to email those my way. I'm always open to seeing new ideas and things that you want to see. We've got lots of recordings out there, but let me know if there's something that you find to be extra helpful. And then what we do is we take that 15-minute recording and we do post it to YouTube. So we do make that available for the public if they need it or want to see that. However, we do have a 45-minute time frame here where it's just Q&A. I do record that because a lot of times you guys want the full recording. Sometimes that's helpful. You can take it back to whomever needed to have that answer to that question. And so I don't mind sending you the full recording if you just let me know. Typically we don't send it out unless it's requested, but I do have it, so if you need it, let me know. Okay, so that's a little bit about office hours. So some of the different topics that we're going to touch today is, what does role context mean? You really need to understand role context before you can really get in there and really start messing with roles and doing anything with them. One of the other things I want to talk about is whether or not you should really edit a core role. Typically, best practice on that is leave your core roles alone. You can always stack additional permissions on, and we'll talk a little bit about what I call stacked roles and how you can utilize those. But you typically want to leave those core roles alone, let them stay as they are, and then either add permissions to a different role, make an archetype, different things like that. So we'll talk about that as well. One of the other things we'll talk about is, does your role have to have an archetype? That confuses people a lot of times, and they think that they have to have one, and they don't know which role to choose. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and then also letting you know about those stacked roles that I call them, and that's meaning that somebody holds more than one role. They may hold more than one role in multiple contexts. They may hold more than one role in the same context. Just depends on what your overall, what you're trying to achieve at the very end here. And then finally, we'll get to the part that you probably want to see the most, is how do you actually go through and actually create those roles. I will also show you a couple of roles that we've created before that are fairly common roles that we see used pretty often. We kind of create them here and there for different clients based on different needs, but they're really easy to set up, and so wanted to make sure that we showed you those. Okay. So first things first, I want to make sure that you understand context. So a lot of times you will hear me refer to the system level context. Sometimes you hear people refer to that as the site administrative context. Sometimes you also hear that referred to as your top level context. So that's this context right here. So think about it like an upside down pyramid. You've got your system level context. So what that means is that if I hold a role in that system level context, what's going to happen is I'm going to have those rights or have those permissions or security or whatever you call it. I'm going to have that available all the way throughout the system. So think about this as kind of an arrow all the way down. I'm going to have those permissions everywhere inside of the system. Next, you have your category context. This is typically the next most commonly used, and it's also going to be a step down from system. So when I'm talking category, I'm talking course categories, meaning that I have permission just inside my category and the courses that are inside of my category and the activities inside of those courses. So again, upside down pyramid, arrow, all pointing down. Okay, so we've got that. And then we have our course level context. So you can also assign roles in the course level context, meaning that they only have those permissions just inside their course. So that's the only place they have that permission. And then also you can even do this down at the activity level. So that's also something that is available and possible. Now these are going to be the most common context where we see that we're going to make these assignments. And I'll show you kind of where you would do these assignments at each location, because they're all kind of in a different place. So we'll go through each of these different ones. Okay, but I want you to just kind of wrap your mind around that. Always think about that as an upside down pyramid or an arrow pointing down. Just kind of think of it, if I have it up here, I'm going to have it all the way down. Okay, so that helps to kind of keep in mind there what exactly we're talking about. And let me get my example site pulled up over here. Got to rearrange some stuff. I had to clear my cookies so that it would let me log in to go to webinar today, and now I may have to log in a couple places, so I apologize for that. All right, so we've talked about what exactly does context mean. Let's talk about where you edit these roles first and foremost, and which ones are core and which ones aren't. So there we go. I do have to sign back in. And let me hop back in here real quick. Okay, so typically inside of your system, you're going to have several core roles inside of that system. Those are generally going to be your site manager, not to be confused with your staff manager. Okay, staff manager is assigned actually within a user context, which is a more unique context, but it's a core thing. Then we have course creator, editing trainer, trainer, learner, guest, authenticated user on the front page, staff manager. And then I believe also assessor, regional manager, regional trainer. Those are going to be, those are also going to be some core roles that are in your system. You don't generally use those quite as much. There are different use cases for them, and we can talk about it specifically for that regional manager role and that regional trainer role. You typically only want to assign someone that role just so they can see a report. And so we'll talk about that as well. Okay, so these are going to be your core roles. Typically, you do want to leave them alone. If you've already edited them, don't think, oh gosh, I got to go back and I got to change them. Leave them alone. You probably have them doing what you want them to do. So leave them alone at this point. But if you're moving forward, try not to edit them any further, because you do have the ability to add in additional roles and make the roles that you already have work with those roles. Now, there are situations where you may have to tweak a core role just a smidge, and that's okay. Typically, we ask, why don't you contact us? You've got some support time. Our support guys are really good at helping on that kind of stuff, just to make sure that you don't do that. Another thing to keep in mind when dealing with roles, test, 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 test. Make sure it really does what you want it to do. Because if we go in here and we take a look at our permissions, I've also heard people refer to them as securities. Okay, if we look at this, if you notice, my little scrolly bar is tiny. So this is how many, you're going to need a Dramamine, because you might get a little seasick seeing this. This is how many potential permissions are available throughout the entire system. So each of these different permissions have a different purpose and a different reason. And so if you go in and set those permissions, you want to make sure that you test them, because one thing to keep in mind, some of these permissions may allow people to see a little more than what you're thinking it's going to allow them to see. Some of these permissions may have a dual purpose, meaning that it's going to give you access to a little more in the administrative menu than you maybe want someone to have access to. So you want to definitely test that and make sure that they are seeing exactly what it is you want them to see. So that's going to be a first disclaimer, hey, make sure you do this. My second biggie is think about these permissions think about this as an electrical board, a very important electrical board, and you have to make sure that you turn on the light bulb. Okay, so stick with me for a second on my analogy. So you want to make sure that the light bulb turns on. And you have an electrical board and you have all these different circuits. When you're doing that, you're typically not going to go in and change a bunch of the circuits all at once. So change, like, say you got 10 circuits, you're not going to go in there and change 9 of them and then hope it works, right? That's how people approach this a lot of time. And so if you change 9 out of the 10 and your light bulb still doesn't come on, you don't know why your light bulb didn't come on, because you changed 9 out of 10 and you don't know which one did it, right? So typically, if you're wanting to do that, you need to change one, see if it did it, see if your light bulb came on. If your light bulb doesn't come on, put it back. Put it back how you found it. So go back, change your circuit back to where it was, change another one, right? Then check it. So that's a good way to go about that. So creating these custom roles can sometimes take a little bit of time, but it's worth that time because you're not giving people too many permissions, you're not giving them too much access, and you're finally getting the role that you want to use. Okay? So things to keep in mind and things to remember and things to consider. Now, let's talk a little bit about the different contexts again, where you might assign these. Actually, before we do that, let's just go ahead and start building a new role. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to assign a role that, this is pretty common. We see it a lot of times. It's a special role for somebody who I just want them to be able to view a report. That's all I want them to be able to do. They don't necessarily need to take any learning in the site. They don't necessarily need to be doing really anything, but I want them to see that My Reports tab, and I want them to have access to a report. This is probably one of the easiest roles you will ever create because there's not a whole lot to it. So you can come in here and you can say add a new role. Typically you might see this role for someone who's higher up in the company. They really just care about results, don't really care about what's going on as far as the training is concerned. They're going to let you tell them what's going on with the training, right? They just want to see a report. So a lot of times we see this role for that type of purpose. Your archetype, not going to have one. It's just going to be a blank role all the way across the board. Now here's all your different archetypes, and we can talk about that in a second. But this one's not going to have one. And I'm going to go ahead and say continue. And I'm going to call this report viewer. Short name, all one word. Also, one of the cool things about custom roles is you can give people a big fancy title, but no permissions. So we also see that done quite a lot as well. Okay, so we have our role archetype here. We just want to assign this as the system level context. And then actually what we're going to do, we're going to leave everything else alone. We're not even going to give them any permissions. No need to give them any permissions. And we're going to click on create this role. Okay, really all we need is just basically some type of role to assign to them so that they can see a report. So you're sitting here going, okay, Taylor, you're not making sense. This is goofy. What are you going to do with this? So let's go and take a look at a report. So I'm going to go into my reports, report builder, and manage reports. I'm going to open this in another tab so I can keep my screen. And we'll go into this course report here. I'm going to open it and we're going to view it. Okay, so we see some data in here. We see the reports. We see kind of where it's located. We have somebody else who may want to see this. So I'm going to click on edit this report. Remember, you have a content and an access tab. Your content is going to be who sees what. Your access tab is going, or content tab is going to be what is the content inside of the report. What is the data you want people to see. Access is going to be who has access to that report. And remember, you have this nice, neat little permission here. Only certain users can view this report. And guess what? Since we made that available at the system level context, look who shows up, our report viewer. So we're able to save those changes. Now the next thing that we have to do is we have to give someone that role so that they're able to see reports. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to go to users, accounts, browse list of users. I'm going to use one of my users that's never logged into this system. So probably don't have any kind of permissions anywhere else. So we'll go with Alan Pierce. So we'll search for him. So where you would assign that, we're going to go underneath permissions, and it is underneath assign system roles. So he's at the top of the pyramid. However, we gave him no permissions. We just gave him access to a report, right? So we're going to click on Report Viewer, and we're going to search for him. Well, that didn't do it. There he is, Alan Pierce. We're going to add him in. Okay, and I'm going to jump over here to my other screen. We're going to log in as Alan. So let me log out here. Grab his username. I'm going to write it down because I don't remember much. 7Fs. Okay, so I'm going to jump over here. And when I log in, he should see a My Reports tab now, and he does. And he already sees a couple of reports for maybe a variety of different reasons, but there's that course report that we wanted him to see. So he's able to see this particular report based on the one role with no permissions that we gave him, but we assigned that role to the report. So that's a pretty common role that we see created from time to time, because you might want somebody to have access to see something, but they don't really need to do anything else in the system. Now, you do have to do that assignment on every single report that you want them to see, but it's pretty easy at that point. Once they hold that role, go in, grab them, put that role, associate it to the report. Okay, so that's one of the things that we see done quite often. Okay, another one that we see created pretty often is called a report administrator. Now, this particular role only holds one permission. I have had one client do this so far. I see this being a potential big role that I will have others use in the future. So here we have report admin. This again probably needs to be a system level role. And then we have one permission applied. So what you can do, guys, is you can filter based on what it is you're looking for. So I know that it's relating to reports. So I'm just going to type in the word report. One thing to note about this screen and all of these hundreds and maybe thousands, I'm not real sure how many are there, a bunch, of permissions, pay attention to the bolded text on the top. That's the header. So what that means is that that permission relates to that particular context. Okay, so block report graph, meaning this report is within the block called report graph. Okay, so that's not what I'm looking for. This is also based on a block course overview. So this is a totally different area where I can build reports. Performance overview, also totally different area. Question instances, that's within a quiz. Security overview, that I believe is going to be in your security administrative settings, I think. Hierarchies, that's going to be referring to your positions in your organizations. There we go, that's what we're wanting. Report builder. We want this person to be able to build and schedule and do whatever they need to do with reports. That's really their only purpose on the site, is to build reports. Okay, so what we can do, come in here, set that to allow. Now, a common question that I get when we talk about this stuff is, okay, but what does not set mean, what does prevent mean, and what does prohibit mean? So they have their own purposes. Not set, of course, is kind of what it sounds like. Not set, so I don't really have that permission. I can't do much. Allow is also exactly what it sounds like. I now have the permission to do that thing. Prevent means that I can't do it potentially in different contexts. So if I'm prevented from doing it maybe in a system level, you can actually edit roles down inside of courses as well, meaning that you could potentially give them one ability inside of a course. Permissions, man, guys, they get wild within the system. There's a lot going on there, but that's what prevent means. Prohibit means I can't have that permission anywhere. Anywhere throughout the system, I cannot hold this permission. Okay? Another common question I get asked here is, what do the little triangles mean? Okay? The little triangles are going to give you, you can click on them. They will probably give you a Moodle message here. And sometimes it will tell you the risk of giving someone that role. Some of them are very good about giving you a pretty good little detailed overview of what's going to happen if you give someone that permission. Some of them don't give you a whole lot of information. You'll notice also here, some of these are links as well as far as what that permission is. A lot of times, unfortunately, it's not super helpful. In this particular instance, this is more of a Totara permission than a Moodle permission, so it's not going to give you just a whole lot of detail. But a lot of them, if you know how to read this screen, a lot of them are pretty self-explanatory. And again, think of it as that circuit board. Switch one and test it. Don't get in there and go willy-nilly and set a whole bunch of permissions that you can't remember what you set. Another good idea, write down the permission that you set when you're building roles, because sometimes it can get difficult to distinguish, especially when you're using an archetype, to distinguish between which role you set and which roles you didn't. Okay, so or which permissions you set and which ones you didn't. So never hurts to write them down. You can always find them again by searching for this right here. So keep that in mind as well. Okay, so enough of that jibber jabber. But we've given this person, this is a report admin, they can run and do reports. So we've given them that permission. We're going to save our changes. That's all we need to do. Well, then you got to assign it. So you would assign it the same exact way that we just assigned the other one. So same place, assign system roles, except for that role. So this is our report administrator. I already have someone assigned to that role. Her name is Virginia. So let's log in as Virginia, just so you can see the difference in what she sees versus what Alan saw. And also the difference in what I see versus what Virginia sees. So what we did is we basically gave her access to the report builder. So we see under her site administration menu, reports, report builder. If we look under my administration menu, I'm a site administrator, I get a few more permissions than her. Okay, so that kind of shows you there what's going on. Now there's a trick to this particular role, and I want to make sure that I point out what the trick is, because otherwise you'll get it created and then be like, she's crazy, she doesn't know what she's talking about. So I've got my different reports in here. I hold the report builder role. You'll notice that I see the ability to edit, I see the ability to delete, I see the ability to view. I can edit embedded reports. So this role comes with quite a lot of power with one permission. Okay, keep that in mind. I can build brand new ones. I can do all kinds of cool stuff. However, when I go to view a report, I'm going to get an error, and that's to be expected. So, and it says you do not have permission to view this page. That is not referring to a permission in the role. Okay, that again is referring to the same permission for that report viewer. That's referring to that same access rule. Okay. So what you have to do, and she has the ability to do it for herself, but if you're going to put somebody in this role, you need to make sure that they're trained and know how to utilize it. So basically, have that role in system context. She needs to check the box for it, save the changes. Once she does that, she can then view the report. Should be able to view the report. Oh, that's always fun when it doesn't work in front of people. Let's see here. User save. That's always fun. It worked earlier, I promise. So let's see what's going on. Let's do any context. Should be system, but see if that makes a difference. Huh. Well, that's always good when it doesn't work. Promise it did earlier. I can show you another report where it did. So what was my other report? I think it was, I don't remember which one it was. See, guys, it happens to everybody. Let's edit this one. See if she can see it. Access, role in the system context, report viewer, save. You know what it is? I'm clicking report viewer. I'm not doing report administrator. So that's why it didn't work. So we've got report administrator and report viewer. So that's what I was clicking instead of report administrator. There's another thing that you probably shouldn't do. Don't name things exactly the same. Okay, so we've got report administrator, save our changes. Now she should be able to see it. Ah, ta-da, magic, it works. Okay, so that's what it was. I was assigning the wrong checkbox. So that's something that you need to train your people on how to do. Okay, so keep that in mind there. Okay, guys, I know that I'm being a little bit long-winded here. Good catch, Linda. She caught it and I missed it. Sorry, I didn't see my question box over here. I realize I'm being a little long-winded, but I hope that this is beneficial for you guys because I want to make sure that you're aware of all the different ways to utilize this. So that's going to be another pretty common role that we see utilized that's kind of helpful for folks to apply and utilize on their site. So one other thing that I want to talk about really quickly is we talked about different contexts and how people can hold those roles in different contexts. So as a result, let's talk about where you actually go to give them those roles in those contexts. So we talked about system already, so you know where to go to do that. But let's talk about category level context. Category level context, pretty easy. I'm going to jump back over as my site administrator. So that is going to be located underneath courses, manage courses in categories. And then you should be seeing your categories. However, depending on some of your themes, I've noticed recently some of the themes kind of default to the course page, or it's going to default to what you maybe last looked at. So you may need to switch this back where you're seeing your course categories. So keep that in mind. Then next to your category, you should see a gear icon. Then when you click that gear, you have a drop-down. You should see the Assign Roles option there. So you can assign a role. And then here you have the ability to assign right now Site Manager and Course Creator. Those are roles that currently are available in that context. If you've created another role and you want it to be available in that context, what you can do, so I'm going to switch over to another tab where I'm already seeing my roles so I don't have to navigate a bunch. And I'm going to come in here. We're just going to look at this Content Auditor role. We're going to edit. And we're going to make sure that it's available in the category context. So the category box within the context types where this role may be assigned, that wasn't checked. So I'm going to check category, come down and save, or go up and save actually, that's a little faster. Now we're going to come over here and refresh the screen. We now see Content Auditor show up here. Content Auditor is another role that you might find beneficial. Basically, all they have the ability to do is go in and view courses. One thing it's going to also show you is it's going to show you that some people may have that role in another context. So that way you don't assign them the same role in multiple contexts. Because if she has the role in the system context, it doesn't matter. You don't have to give it to her in the category context. Okay? So that's something to keep in mind as well. So that's going to be where you're going to do that at the category level. Where you might do this at the course level, if you have a custom role that's available at a course level, that's going to be underneath Site Administration and Courses, Manage Courses. You're going to go into a course. So select a course. Clicked on the wrong thing. Click into the course. And then you're going to have access. You can either do this by going into the course, Course Administration, Enrolled Users, or you can go straight to it from this screen, going to Enrolled Users. Then when you add someone to a course, you can either add them an additional role, so you should see the roles that are created at this course level. So you can give them that role there, or when you add a brand new user, just make sure that you change the role that they hold. So that's another way to do that as well. Okay? One more thing, guys. Sorry. And I can hang around a little bit longer if you can to answer any questions. I know I'm kind of taking a lot, but this is a big topic. There's a lot going on here, and we get lots of these questions. So another question I get a lot of times is, can somebody hold multiple roles? They absolutely can. You can stack roles. And so what that means is that I may need somebody to be an instructor in a course, but I need to give them just a little more access. You can create one of those blank roles like I showed you with no archetype, and then just give them the one permission that they need. Choose which context that that's applied in, and then what you can do is go in and give them that role inside of that course, that category, wherever they may need that particular role. So that is it. I will finally wrap up and turn the floor over to you guys. I know I took up a little bit more time than I normally do, but I wanted to make sure that we covered that pretty thoroughly. Okay, so any questions that you guys have, please feel free to let me know what those are.